Hi, I'm Joni Patry, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Well, today I want to talk about something that everyone seems to ask me about at some point, and that is the Saturn return. And people get this always mixed up with the Saudi Sati. Anything to do with Saturn, they kind of blend them all together and think they're the same thing, but they're not. Saturn return is actually something that's more of a Western astrology concept, but let me give you what it's really all about. Now, before I do, I always want to remind everyone to sign up for my free newsletter. What are you waiting for? You'll get all of my predictions delivered to your email address once a week. So go to galacticcenter.org. And remember, while you're there, check out my new magazine, which is the first issue will begin this July, and it's Joni Patry's Astrology Insights. This magazine is stellar. It's going to have interviews of famous Vedic astrologers, as well as research journal from the university, all the research projects that the students have been working on, plus sign predictions. Everything to do with the Vedic sciences will be part of this magazine, and most of all will be who's in the news. I mean, this is a wealth of information, and you will want to be part of this, and maybe you'll even want to write for it. So check it out on my website, galacticcenter.org. And last but not least, I have to tell you, the university is starting July 6th. If you want to learn Vedic astrology and be part of a spiritual community, join us. It starts July 6th. Go to universityofvedicastrology.com. Now, let's talk about what the Saturn return is. All it simply is when Saturn comes back to the starting position that it was when you were born. Now, the planets all have their cycles. In other words, they take a certain amount of time to go through all 12 signs of the zodiac, which is, in this case, what Saturn has to do. Saturn stays in a sign for 2.5 years. And by the time it transits through all 12 signs of the zodiac and returns to the same place it was when you were born, it takes between 28 to 30 years, usually around 29.5. Depends on where you're born in the cycle of where Saturn is retrograde, whether it takes 28 or 29.5 years. But here's the situation at hand. Everyone goes through it at the same time. So everyone around their late 20s going into their 30s is going through their Saturn return. Now, it is very different from Saudi Sati. And when I try to explain Saudi Sati to people, they think I'm talking about the Saturn return. No. Yes, they both deal with Saturn. But here's the difference. Saudi Sati is when Saturn transits over your natal moon in your chart. It's not when Saturn comes back to where it was, it's where Saturn goes to where your moon is. And depending on where your moon is, you could get it 3 years after birth if your moon sits like one sign away from Saturn, or you could get it almost 28 years later if your moon sits all the way towards the back of where Saturn's starting when you're born. So in other words, don't worry about all of that. Saudi Sati is when Saturn comes to your natal moon. And yes, it is very, very difficult for most people. Not everyone, but I have to say my Saudi Sati was hell. But that's beside the point. And that was in 2008 when I went through Saudi Sati. So here's the thing. Saudi Sati is when Saturn comes to the sign before, the sign of, and the sign after the moon. So remember, Saturn in its motion takes 7.5 years for it to go through those 3 signs, because remember, it stays in a sign for 2.5. So 2.5 times 3 would be 7.5. Sati Sati actually means 7.5 years. So, but here's the thing. I simply think Sati Sati comes to its worst when it's in the sign of the moon. I think it's silly to think that your life is going to be terrible for 7.5 years. It's silly. It's ridiculous. It's not true. Okay? Yeah, people start blaming everything on Sati Sati when Saturn comes to the sign before the moon or after the moon. But it's most intense when it's in the sign of the moon or on top of your moon. But that's not the Saturn return. Let's go back to what Saturn return is all about. You know, many people say that the 27 Club, those that die when they're age 27, they equate it to the Saturn return, because when Saturn starts to return to the place that it was when you were born, what it essentially means, Saturn is what? Responsibility. Saturn is growth through hard work. Saturn's discipline, Saturn's focus, Saturn's structure. Saturn is no fun. It's time to get to work. Jupiter's all about having a big party and having fun and celebrating. But Saturn's about let's get serious and let's get the work done. We could not achieve anything in our lives if it weren't for Saturn. But it's hard on us. Like I said, Saturn coming to where your moon is, or even to many of your planets, can be a real downer, because Saturn it can rule depression, it's seriousness, and it means hard work. Now, I love to work. I don't know about you. Working's fun to me. But Saturn sometimes has this heavy sense of responsibility when it comes to a planet. You feel heavy. And when Saturn comes to your sun sign, you're exhausted, you're tired, because the sun is the physical being. But what we're talking about with the Saturn return is when Saturn comes back to conjunct your natal Saturn. So all the planets have their cycles when they come back and they return and conjunct their natal position. All of them do. Jupiter has a cycle of every 12 years that you have a Jupiter return. But here is something special about the Saturn return. When you go to your second Saturn return, which is around age 58 to 60, this is when both Jupiter will be be making its return every 12 years. But when you're 58 to 60, you will have a Jupiter return at the same time you have a Saturn return. This is exceptional. This means that this point in your life is extremely rewarding and many opportunities come. Unlike the Saturn return when you're 28, around 28 and a half to 30, around that time, the end of your 20s into your 30s, you don't have the Jupiter return at the same time. But essentially what it really is all about, people say, oh, I'm going to my Saturn return. Everyone goes through it at the same time. It just means it's time to grow up. It's time to grow up and get serious. And I always say the Saturn return is what makes people different in their 20s to people in their 30s. People in their 30s have to start thinking about family, whether I have children. Can I provide for a family? You got to get serious and responsible. In your 20s, you don't care. Well, yeah, you do, but you know what I mean. It's not like it's more impending as it is. When you reach 30, you start thinking about your accomplishments and what you want to do and what you want to achieve, and you get more serious about it. And going back to the 27 Club, many people think that that's why people die at age 27, because they don't want to grow up. They don't want to change. And that's what that's about. Of course, the 27 Club in Vedic astrology, I believe there's other reasons why that's such a turning point where people die. So many people notoriously have died at age 27. I mean, Janis Joplin, Kurt Cobain, all these major rock and rollers that wouldn't change at the last minute. And guess what? They had to deal with it. Jim Morrison, I could think of so many more, but they wouldn't change. They wouldn't grow up. But it's also when Mars comes to its fruition point in Vedic astrology, age 28. So you see these ages astrologically have deep meaning and why things occur when they do. But Saturn return is not sati sati. It's so much a part of evolution in life and growing up. That's all it is maturing. And hopefully you're ready to mature at that age, because nobody wants to be immature and carefree all throughout life. Because what does Saturn give? Saturn gives us our best and our just rewards. A job well done. How do you feel when you accomplish something that you put so much energy and effort into, and you've achieved greatness with it? That's the Saturn. And you will feel this such a reward. Saturn gives the greatest rewards because it's what you've earned, what you put your blood, sweat, and tears into is what Saturn's all about. So both Saturn returns are phenomenal. I think they're a time of accomplishment, getting serious, and making the plans that you need to for the rest of your life, for your accomplishments and your achievements and your accolades, and this is the time you get rewards. So I'm saying Saturn gives that, but at these return dates and times, it's not necessarily that you get the rewards then, it's that Saturn gets you off your rear and gets you working towards what's going to give you your greatest sense of accomplishment. That's what Saturn return is, growing up. That's all it is. And of course, what house it's in will have an effect on you. The sign it's in will have an effect on you. But everyone goes through it at the same time in their life. And everyone comes to a point of maturity saying, it's time for me to get on the ball and do what I've come here to do with this lifetime. That's Saturn return. So I don't want to hear people blaming their Saturn return for anything, because you're not going to get any sympathy from me. You're going to actually get that it's an opportunity for growth, because that's what Saturn gives us. Opportunity for achievement and growth. And that's what the Saturn return should be focused in all about. So I just wanted to clear up everyone about the Saturn return versus the Sati Sati. And yes, Sati Sati is a time of heaviness and responsibility. And I gotta say, the moon with your emotions and your feelings and Saturn being on it, it's heavy and it's not much fun. But it's quite a different energy from the Saturn return. And Saturn return is a process that we all must go through to mature and grow in life. So with that, I'd like to close. If you would like more information on me, you can always go to my website, which is galacticcenter.org. Remember to sign up for my free newsletter and check out my new magazine. And if you want to learn Vedic astrology, go to my university website. So my website is galacticcenter.org. My university website is universityofvedicastrology.com. Thank you.